Hello and welcome to episode 299 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
I'm James Whittingham. This week, DoorDash is earning its name as it is being hired by a robotaxi company to come and close doors on cars when customers neglect to. No word on if they're contracting Grubhub when hubcaps fall off.
2 companies in Australia have put solar panels on the roofs of their refrigerated trucks to power the cooling. This makes those vehicles the coolest thing to come from Australia since Margot Robbie, who is, ironically, also the hottest thing to come out of Australia.
The U.S. is preventing Cuba from generating electricity with heavy sulfur oil from Venezuela. Now Cuba has to decide whether to erect solar panels or burn all their cigars to power the grid.
Prepaid electricity meters are causing problems in the extreme heat of the current Australian summer. The record-breaking heat was recently exacerbated by the release of the new, extremely hot Wuthering Heights movie starring Margot Robbie. They really should have waited until the Australian winter to release that one.
All that and more in this 6th anniversary edition of The Clean Energy Show. And also on the show this week, lasers are now charging drones at the kilowatt level for 1 mile away. Yes, that's actually happening. The future is here.
What can't lasers do? They can do everything.
Brian, my kids are home because it's a week off school. My son's home from university, and about 20 minutes ago, they were hearing maniacal laughter coming from the podcast studio, and they still have no reason why. And yes, it's our 6th anniversary as we record this. Well, actually, when we recorded our bonus episode on Thursday, it was our 6th anniversary.
Yeah.
And it's hardly worth mentioning anymore. So many years. I mean, maybe 10 we'll celebrate and have a party. I don't know, but you've made fun of the Pope before on the show.
Look, I love the Pope, especially the cool Pope.
Okay, you're non-religious, but you have
No.
You have made fun of the Pope on the before. You've maybe done some little AI work with his voice because he is the central big figure.
Yeah.
And this morning, I was laughing because I got a press release from the Vatican.
Wow. We've made it, James.
Never assume God is not listening, Brian. I think we need to be careful now.
Yeah, the Vatican is listening.
There are 1 million active podcasts, and we got a press release from the Vatican. And I don't think that's an accident. You know, I know that the Vatican is pro-clean energy, and this wasn't about clean energy. This was about visiting hours at St. Peter's Basilica.
Yeah.
And a new digital card that we can, I don't know if it's an overture to maybe, a preamble to maybe us having to sit down with the Pope.
Yeah.
That would increase our audience, I think. An exclusive with the Pope. Good friend of the show, I would like to think. And maybe if His Holiness is listening, I'd like to apologize for everything that Brian has said, every joke that Brian has made, and please don't send me to hell. I don't want to go there. So that's, I thought I'd get that out of the way. I'm still laughing at that. I'm sorry. It's just weird. We get a lot of press releases, but not from the frickin' Vatican.
Yeah. Well, that's wild. All right. We talk a lot about China. This is not a clean energy story, but since we talk a lot about China, I thought this was interesting. Do you know what the hottest phone app is in China right now?
It's not WeChat?
Well, sure, maybe that, but
okay. Oh, you mean like an app for doing things that are not communicating necessarily? No, I don't.
It's the Are You Dead app.
Oh, I need one of those. We should get that here.
Yeah. Well, it's mostly for people who live alone.
Okay. Well, I was thinking, it reminds me of our friend Kevin Allardyce, who used to, many years ago, like 25 years ago, had a little tray icon on his Windows computer that was, is Abe Vigoda alive?
Oh, yeah.
And he actually lived for many decades before he actually did die, and that app changed. Yeah. But yeah, he would have that in his tray, is Abe Vigoda alive? Because I guess people thought he was older than he was.
Yes.
But yeah, now they have one for Are You Dead? Okay.
Yeah, and of course, online, the latest version of that is Liza Minnelli. Liza Minnelli has outlived. And whenever somebody dies, this account posts, oh, Liza Minnelli has now outlived blank, whoever the latest person is that's passed away. So
why Liza Minnelli? And by the way, people outside North America, Abe Vigoda was an old man on a 70s sitcom based at a police station. I can't even remember it now. It was,
yeah.
What was it? What was the show?
Barney Miller.
Barney Miller, right.
Yeah.
Quality, well-reviewed show, like Critics' Baby and good success.
He's one of those guys. He always looked like an old man, but he was probably only 50 when he was
probably
on
younger
that
than
show.
us. He was probably younger than us, honestly. So that's something.
But yeah, this app, it's for people who live alone in China, and it forces you to click on it every 2 days to confirm that you're alive. And if you don't click on it every 2 days, it alerts your friends to let them know that, you might be in trouble.
And the Chinese government to take you off the tax rolls. I don't know.
I guess so, yeah.
Okay.
So last week I had a joke about Ferrari has a new electric car. And so my joke off the top of the show was, Johnny Ive, the former Apple designer, is doing some design on the car. So
I noticed
made a
you didn't
joke
actually
about,
have a story about that. You had a joke at the top of the show, but no story about it.
Well, that's because you covered it, so I didn't think I needed to.
Okay. I just mentioned it, but okay.
But part of the joke was, the charging port for the new Ferrari will be on the bottom of the car, and the connector will change every 2 years. So if you're not a Mac user, you won't necessarily get that joke, but the Apple Magic Mouse that I'm holding up right here, the charge port is very, very famously on the bottom of the unit. Like, this is a rechargeable wireless mouse, but the charge port is on the bottom. And it's never been a problem for me, like you just charge it regularly and it's never a problem. But I came down today to record the podcast and my mouse was completely dead. I couldn't do anything with my computer without the mouse. And, you just have to charge it for 2 minutes and then you can use it. But nevertheless, it's annoying, and it finally bit me, the charge port on the bottom of the mouse. All right, so electric heat pumps have once again outsold gas furnaces in the United States in 2025. And we talked about this a year ago, so I thought I would offer a little update. This story is from Canary Media. And the one caveat to this is that you sometimes need more than one heat pump in your home if you're, upgrading to a heat pump, whereas you would typically only have one gas furnace in your home. So that is the one caveat to this story. But still a big, big deal. For a couple of years now, electric heat pumps have been outselling gas furnaces in the U.S. It slowed down a little bit this year. Gas furnaces ticked up a little bit, and the electric heat pumps, lost a little bit of ground, but they are still outselling. Of course, the federal regulations in the U.S. have been changing, so there aren't the rebates that there was at the federal level. But locally and statewide, there are different incentives that you can get. And also the main thing that happened this year, in September, more heat pumps shipped than central air conditioners for the very first time. So heat pumps are now starting.
Oh, is that right? That's
yeah.
That's actually the surprising part for me, because I know heat pumps are replacing oil heating in the Northeast and Southeast U.S.
Yeah.
But to think, everybody's buying air conditioners because, things we talk about on the show.
Yeah.
So that's kind of surprising that even that would outdo air conditioning. And you have to replace those, especially if they're running 24/7 in Arizona. They do have to be replaced.
And heat pumps, even if you're using it mostly for cooling, as we've discussed before on the show, they are more efficient for doing cooling than a typical air conditioner. They're just a little bit more advanced technology, and they're more about moving the heat around rather than creating the heat or creating the cooling. So if you can, try and get a heat pump rather than a standard air conditioner. But, this is a trend that's not going to go anywhere. It did slow down a little bit in 2025, this transition, but no one expects gas furnaces to recover anytime soon, and it should just be downhill for them from here.
Heat pump air conditioners work a lot more powerfully than normal air conditioners. They're oversized because if you size, depending on where you live, if you size it to heat the home, it might be, it might turn you into a fridge pretty quick, which is a good thing, I guess. But, sometimes it's better to run at low speed than it's quite effective and maybe more energy efficient to do it that way. I think I've heard about heat pumps cooling them.
Yeah, well, that's part of their efficiency is that they have a greater ability to wind themselves down and run at a lower rate than a typical air conditioner does. So, that's one of the things that makes them more efficient than an air conditioner.
All right, let's turn to Cuba.
In Havana, the roar of classic engines is giving way to the hum of electric batteries and the rhythm of pedaling feet as Cuba faces one of its worst fuel shortages in decades.
I used to be a driver. I used to drive a vintage car, but because of the petrol and oil situation, we had to find this alternative, a tricycle. There is no other way to keep the population moving.
The fuel shortages have also led to severe power cuts, forcing tricycle drivers to charge whenever electricity is available. Some have mounted solar panels on their tricycles, hoping to stay on the road when the grid goes dark.
Yeah, things are so bad with the power grid that, it's one thing to go from a gas car to electric transportation, but to go from the mid-century classic cars that they've been using there because of the embargoes against them to electric it seems like a huge jump to me. It's a good jump because, of course, those cars are not efficient, and nor are they anywhere near pollution standards as far as air pollution goes. So it seems like a big deal to me. Now, things are so bad with the power grid in Cuba, you may have heard about it on the show here, that, 2- and 3-wheelers are coming out of the woodwork, and they're charging them on the roof with solar panels, and they're putting solar panels on the ground to charge them because the electricity is not there. I mean, Cuba, I didn't know this, they generate the vast majority of its electricity using fossil fuels, but not normal fossil fuels, like really bad fossil fuels, like high sulfur crude oil, the crap that comes out of the refinery that they can't use for anything else. They put it in ships. Yeah. And the ships don't even burn that near certain ports where they're not allowed to because it's so bad. It's just a lot of smoke, but they're starting to clean that up. But also some imported oil. They get a little bit of their stuff from domestically, their fossil fuels. 40% of the stuff actually comes from Cuba. But the rest is imported, mostly from Venezuela. And of course, the American administration has said, no, Venezuela is our country and our resource. So this high sulfur crude is just absolute crap, and they should have switched to something better and cheaper and not relied, but they didn't. They probably, unlike the Vatican, not listening to the show, and they should be. Okay. Maybe they can learn a lesson from the Vatican. So it's a residual product of oil refinery, this crap, or direct burned crude, which is cheaper than natural gas, actually, but it burns bad, but not as bad as coal. Coal is still the worst thing you can burn if you don't have any emissions on it. So you have to clean up that burning of the stuff too, even though it's an island. You don't want it going over your people, so it costs money to clean up the emissions from that as it's coming out. And the U.S., of course, cut off the oil exports from Venezuela, and it's caused blackouts because they are powering their electricity grid with this stuff. Such a perfect situation for solar and other renewables and batteries that could have stabilized this. And I wondered if they were working on it, and it turns out they are. Resorts are not able to have power regularly. So people there, I've seen reports on TV talking to tourists there, it's not going well. They're sympathetic to what's going on because the people are not happy who live in Cuba. Canadian Airlines, like I said, stopped. They got everybody out of there last week, I think, because there was no fuel in Cuba to refuel the airplanes. And Cuba's grid is having frequent total collapses. Like the whole stinking thing goes down. We're not talking about a localized blackout here. The whole thing collapses daily, and extended blackouts that last over 20 hours often. And part of it is aging infrastructure, which is neglected infrastructure of the power lines and the different things in the power grid. They fail. Extreme fuel shortages, and they are relying on oil-fired plants, which are largely dysfunctional. These oil-fired plants don't work very well. But what about renewables? Well, they're actually targeting 24% renewables on their grid by 2030. And I think the faster they speed that up, the better example that they will be. Yeah. Now, Cuba is not Pakistan. It's not easy for somebody in Cuba maybe to import whatever they want. I don't know. But I would think it might be more challenging for somebody in Cuba than Pakistan to say, well, the electricity is expensive and unreliable, so I'm setting up my own system. That is behind. But it happens so fast in Pakistan, maybe things can happen quickly there where there's a need. And again, it's with pro-fossil fuel interests in the United States actually speeding up renewables through their policies accidentally, which is hilarious. Yeah, so solar projects are scaling up. There's 32 photovoltaic, as we say, which is solar power, farms or parks operating now, but 19 wind farms are under construction, which is good. And because I think there's a pretty steady breeze off the ocean, and 55 solar parks planned. So they have 32 and they're going to more than double it because they're in the planning stage of those, and they move pretty fast. At least they do here. To improve stability, Cuba is transitioning from a centralized grid to a more distributed model. Centralized means the whole thing, when it goes down, the whole thing collapses, and that's not good. There's, almost 11 million people on the island, and they're all without electricity, can't do anything. So they're utilizing smaller solar installations in rural areas and at critical facilities, which is an idea that they probably should have got on a long time ago. And they announced a big solar milestone this week. Brian, the director of the National Load Dispatch Center, the National Load Dispatch Center, which probably talks about power outages to the people of the Cuban Electric Union, reported that Cuba generated more than 800 megawatts of solar power during a midday peak period on Tuesday, February 10th. So that's quite a bit for an island of 10 million people. But it shouldn't, they're bragging about it. That's what I like.
Yeah.
Because when you start bragging about it and saying, hey, look what solar did, then things really start to take off, I've found. So this follows the installation of more than 1 gigawatt of solar energy capacity added throughout 2025. So that's like a nuclear power plant or a big coal generating station worth in 1 year, which is pretty good for the small island. That's in line with the government's efforts to diversify the country's energy mix. And the Cuban president highlighted that the use of clean energy not only contributes to environmental sustainability, but also strengthens Cuba's energy sovereignty, a story we hear over and over again. And of course, it reduces costs.
Yeah, and if they do make some of their own fossil fuels, perhaps, they can be independent of the rest of the world before too long.
Cover that 60% that's imported with renewables, and boom, communism doesn't collapse.
Yeah, well, I imagine, the Cuba is not the wealthiest country, so I imagine that has contributed to the slow transitioning from these types of things. But it looks like they're on the right track, but they've kind of been forced into the position of being on the right track. All right, a similar vaguely story about blackouts. This is from The Guardian. This is about Australia, and this is about the high cost of electricity in Australia. And I thought it was worth talking about because we were talking frequently lately about, massive solar projects in Australia, massive battery projects in Australia. And one of the reasons that those things make sense is because traditionally the electricity in Australia is quite expensive. It's more expensive, way more expensive than, here in Canada or North America. But the other thing that we have talked about this at some point on the podcast, a lot of people in these kind of remote, often Indigenous territories, communities in the Northern Territory, in Western Australia and Queensland, they often have prepaid power meters. Do you remember us talking about this a few years ago?
Yeah, you prepay in advance. It's like a phone that you prepay for, but you're doing it with power.
Exactly. And
okay,
it made sense to me because I remembered there was an old Mr. Bean episode where Mr. Bean checks into a hotel and there's a box on the wall and he has to put coins in it to get electricity for his hotel room. And it turns out that that's not a crazy thing. This is exactly what's happening in Australia. And I think, there were coin-operated, power meters in certain hotels at some point.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. That's so weird that Mr. Bean would factor into our show. And yet here we are.
I remember Googling it when we talked about this the last time. But yeah, for some reason, they started replacing people's power meters on their homes with these prepaid meters a few years ago. And so you can fill them up with a card and you go down to your local grocery store or your gas station and you can, charge up your card and then you put your card in your power meter at home and then this gives you electricity. But when that runs out, boom, your power is cut off, like Mr. Bean putting coins into his electricity meter in his hotel room. So the one family that they're talking about in this article from The Guardian, they have budgeted $70 a week to add to their prepaid card. So every week they go down to the grocery store, they charge up the card with $70, they take it home, they put it in the power meter, and guess what? In the extreme heat, that only lasts 3 days. So, that's their budget, $70 a week. So, they just end up going without power for a few days. and they have had a record hot summer in the southern half of the Northern Territory that they're talking about in this article. They have already had 40 days over 40 degrees Celsius this summer. It's the summer, of course, now in Australia because they're on the other side of the planet.
Hello, Australia, by the way. Shout out to you guys. I know you're listening. So we neglect you sometimes, but here we are.
Yes,
we're talking.
We are heavy on Australia content this week for sure to make up for it. But yeah, so this is kind of in the Alice Springs area, and it's becoming apparent that this is perhaps going to soon not be habitable for humans. This is a desert-like area, and
this is fascinating.
Yeah,
you know, like I said, my son was home from college, and from college. He's a geography nerd, and we somehow went down this rabbit hole of Australia just 2 nights ago.
Yeah.
And I learned a whole lot about Australia that I didn't know.
Yeah.
And we watched a bunch of YouTube videos, and I'm fascinated with Australia. Now you're telling me that this is not going to be inhabitable, this place.
In this certain area, yes. There's been speculation that, we know that there are going to be climate refugees around the world. Sometimes it will be because of extreme heat. Other times it will be because of rising sea levels. But this whole area is in danger, and kind of shame on the Australian government for not doing something about this because, when it's that hot, people have to have their power. But this system that they have for prepaid meters means that they're having typically 49 power disconnections a year for a lot of these households. Basically every week, like I said. So most people, they don't have an unlimited amount of money to spend on power, so they charge up their cards with whatever they can afford. And when that runs out, their power gets cut, and then they wait till the next week to top it up again. And that's dangerous because extreme heat is the most common cause of weather-related hospitalizations and deaths in Australia. Yeah. And it's only going to get worse from here.
And I would say, aside from, asthma deaths from air pollution, it's probably one of the biggest killers from climate. And it's getting worse literally every year. So,
and it doesn't have to be, 40 degrees Celsius in Australia, like, we experienced here on the west coast of North America a few years ago with that heat dome. And the problem there was that people don't have air conditioners because they're not typically prepared for it.
I'm thinking of tearing my son away from his Olympic watching and getting him in on this, but...
Well, we know there are Australians competing in the Winter Olympics, so we know at least, they have some...
Yeah, and my son is very angry with that, Australia. He's very mad because I know you have mountains, you go to New Zealand, you ski, you do things, but really you're just a big old island desert. And what are you doing beating Canada in the Winter Olympics? You have no right to do, no business doing that. It's just rude, if anything. Let's get into to the mailbag. Why not? Let's just interrupt the show here quick for a letter. It says, hey guys, Columbus has a lot of data centers. Columbus, Ohio, right? Is it Columbus, Ohio?
Yeah.
And did you not go there?
No, I went to Columbus, Indiana. Apparently there's a handful of Columbuses in the U.S. Yeah, Columbi.
Okay. So Columbus has a lot of data centers because of our 765 kilovolt hour transmission line. I don't think it would be hour, would it? It would just be kilovolt transmission line. It's one of the few ultra high voltage lines in the United States. So think of this as a big transmission line that sends a lot of electricity a far distance. And Columbus is on one of those lines in Ohio. Yeah, Columbus, Ohio. This is from Jeff, by the way, in Columbus, Ohio. And he says it's one of the few ultra high voltage lines in the United States. I didn't know that. But even with that, these new data centers that are popping up are also being placed to natural gas lines. So in your story about using fuel cells for data centers, it's most likely that the fuel cells will be breaking apart methane and not pure hydrogen. Yes, when that came out of my mouth, it seemed problematic last week. So
yeah.
This is possible since the methane molecule is mainly hydrogen. And that's what they're talking about doing in Alberta. They want to burn gas. They want to use their natural gas to make hydrogen and pretend they're clean, but it's not. Yeah, it's not clean because there's emissions from them. So it's crazy that this technology has gone from small generators using it as backup power sources for homes using gas lines to now powering data centers, which of course a data center is a bunch of computers. It could be powering Google. It could be powering YouTube. It could be powering AI. These things take literally a nuclear reactor worth of power.
Yeah.
So the fact that this is how they're doing it, he says, is kind of fascinating. So keep up the good work. And he's Jeff Fahrenholz from Columbus, Ohio. Yeah, thanks for the letter. And, always write us. We'd like to hear from you, especially if you think we made a mistake or want to clarify something.
And we predicted a lot of things about clean energy here on the show now that this is our 6th anniversary. We've been doing this a long time, but we did not predict the onslaught of AI data centers. And data centers in general that were going to be sucking up so much power. It's really thrown a bit of a wrench into this whole clean energy thing. We know we can transition to clean energy, but, that will make it tough for all these data centers.
And we certainly didn't know we would use AI to clone the Pope's voice and make jokes on the show.
Yes. My apologies to the Vatican. All right, from Electrek, rooftop solar for semi-trailer trucks. And we've talked before about putting solar panels on cars. And, there is a startup, Aptera, that's trying to make an ultra-efficient kind of 3-wheeled car that has solar panels on it. And
it's basically a go-kart. I mean, more power to them, but it's basically a go-kart.
And they've had some success doing that. That is possible. But by and large, putting solar panels on cars, not a particularly good idea because you just can't make them large enough to really produce enough meaningful power for the car. I know there was a Prius that had a solar panel in the sunroof for a while there.
Even my Leafs had a solar panel on the upper trim level, but it was for topping up the 12-volt battery.
Right.
But it turns out, listeners, that's important because there's a lot going on in an electric car with timers and computers that are running in the background. They call that vampire drain. And sometimes people have problems with their 12-volt battery. And of course, if you have a problem with the 12-volt battery, your whole car doesn't work, or, you have to get it serviced, or an error light comes on. So that's actually a good thing to have those.
And electric cars, of course, have very, very advanced electric technology and battery technology. But because the 12-volt architecture was been legacy to cars for maybe almost 100 years now, electric cars mostly still rely on a little 12-volt battery that is the same as the one found in gas cars. And even under the best of conditions, those things only last 5 years. And whole electric cars with massive and sophisticated battery systems sometimes go down because the 12-volt battery is drained. So this story is about Australia. It comes from Australia. There's 2 companies in Australia that have decided to put solar panels on the roof of a semi-trailer. And now that you say that, it's that makes perfect sense. There's not enough surface area on a car, but on a semi-trailer, the roof of those things is huge, and putting solar panels on there, not a particularly big deal. Now, if it's an electric semi, it's not going to be enough to power the electric semi. You're still going to need to charge it. They're going to use too much power for that. But like the Leaf or the Prius that uses it to top up the 12-volt battery, what they're using in Australia with these trucks is to power refrigerated trucks. So if you're trucking anything refrigerated, like groceries to a grocery store, you have to have a refrigerated trailer on your semi, and these are traditionally powered with the diesel, fuel that your truck is running on. So it's actually quite a polluting thing. And if you imagine these massive distances in Australia, as you say, from Brisbane to Sydney, this is 1,000 miles, 1,600 kilometers. And this was the torture test that they put this through. So they put this test truck on that route, making all the normal stops that you would if it was a normal diesel-powered truck. It took 3 days, which is the typical time, and the result was no diesel was burned to refrigerate the truck. The solar panels charge up some batteries and run the cooling system off these batteries. So, it can go for a certain distance without being charged, but overnight you can also plug it in. You're staying overnight at a truck stop, you can plug in the refrigerator part and run it off that. So this has already been proven. It totally works. This is an absolute no-brainer. This is something that absolutely should be added to every refrigerated semi-truck.
And I think stuff like that has crossed our minds while we've podcasted over the last 6 years. That has come up why not do this and why not do that? Yeah. It's not an aerodynamic hit if you put solar panels, especially modern panels, which can be thin and even flexible if necessary on semi-trailers to help power those refrigeration systems going 1,600 kilometers across South Australia. And it's not even a straight line. I looked, it's not even a straight line.
Yeah.
It's like it's a nasty detour that you have to take to get there from A to B. And I assume a lot of people fly if you're a tourist going from to Brisbane.
And it can be an extremely hot. We're just talking about the extremely hot Australian summers, and that's when you're going to need, guess what, the most refrigeration for the stuff that you're hauling. But coincidentally, the hottest days are often the sunniest days, and, it's the perfect pairing to combat that extreme heat.
It's a good idea, and it does make sense, and it's not even a weight hit, I wouldn't say. If you'd like to contact us, now's the time. Drop us an email, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com, and you can even leave us a voicemail. It's not done often, but when it is, Brian and I are always delighted to hear the voices of our listeners. Speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow. Some people, of course, just send us a voice memo, attach it to an email. You can do whatever you want. I don't care if you put it in a balloon. Get it to us. We'd like to hear from you.
That works as well. We are an independent podcast that is financed by its listeners. So please think about supporting us on Patreon, patreon.com/cleanenergypod. You could support for as little as $1 a month. Coming up next, it's the lightning round.
It's time for the lightning round.
The lightning round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy, and transportation.
In what Electrek says would be a watershed moment, Ford's CEO Jim Farley reportedly spoke with the Trump administration about partnering with Chinese EV makers in the United States. So he's gone to the king and asked for approval. Would this be offensive if we did that?
Yeah. So Ford and the other legacy automakers have struggled, of course, in converting to electric. But if you just get the Chinese to make them for you, that could totally work out.
I think that's good and a necessary idea for the legacy automakers if they want to survive. Lots of reasons for that. It's a lightning round, so I'm not going to go deeper, but that's what I have to say about that. Cyprus appeals to its residents to cut water use by 2 minutes a day. So use 2 minutes, not 2 gallons. 2 minutes less of using your water a day because they have a drought there on the island south of Greece. The reservoirs hit record lows even before tourist season starts, as Cypriots are warned every drop counts. So this is a thing with climate change, water shortages and electricity shortages if you have to cool your home and people dying if they're getting sick or hospitalized if you can't. Chinese company BYD, the automaker, its new Song Ultra SUV offers 708 kilometers of range for $26,000 US in China. In China. Not here, but in China. That's how much it costs there for an SUV, not small, that goes 708 kilometers. So one of these things you got to keep an eye on.
That's probably a slightly exaggerated range thing, but
still long. But still far.
Long. Yeah. No, that's.
I mean, maybe it's 550, maybe it's 600. Who knows? But it's still a long range EV. It's hard to know because different parts of the world have different ways of measuring range, and some of them are realistic, and some of them are not. The London Borough of Harrow is installing 500 new curbside EV chargers across the borough, targeting residents who don't have access to off-street parking. Those would be people, some condos and apartments who don't have electricity or a parking spot and park on the street, and now they can get an EV. And it's time for a CES Fast Fact. If you invested $10,000 in Beyond Meat in 2021, today you would have $41, Brian. And you know what? If I had 10 grand in my back pocket, I might have done that. I might have thought,
Beyond Meat,
to do.
I think it's still a good idea, but there was extreme exuberance when Beyond Meat went public. And what sometimes happens is, the price skyrockets right at the beginning. And now, 41 might be, it might be at more realistic levels now.
I think the pandemic didn't help as well. Inflation that came from it and made because you paid a bit more for Beyond Meat, so everyone went with the cheapest option. Yeah, and I think it needs to improve just a little bit to become more mainstream. And maybe not call it meat. I think that's what the trend now is, just to call it, like McDonald's released a veggie burger, but they didn't release a Beyond Chicken burger. They just released a veggie burger, and it seems to work that way. On the weekend, Kiev in Ukraine was back to 95% power grid operation for the capital city. So they've been suffering blackouts, but not climate change.
Yeah.
An a-hole in Russia named Putin has been bombing the hell out of them for no good reason. And they've been suffering major outages due to attacks from Putin for a long time, of course, but he went right after the power grid as soon as the cold weather hit. China, he wants to break the will of the people so that they give in and give up their territory. China's BYD has overtaken Ford in global car sales for the first time. That's related to our earlier story, maybe why the Ford CEO is thinking about partnerships with China. And, they're going to overtake GM next, and then Toyota's at the top, and that's going to happen maybe 2030. Maybe. BYD is not doing great. There's a lot of other Chinese competition. They don't have a monopoly on it, but they are probably the number one exporter. Investment in next-generation geothermal has risen sharply, surging from $20 million globally in 2018 to $2 billion last year.
Wow.
So things are happening with geothermal.
Yeah.
We're just not hearing about it all the time. The investment is there. The cheaper version of lithium batteries, known as lithium iron phosphate, or LFP, for their name or letters on the periodic scale. Table. Pardon me. That's how far high school is behind me. It's a distance now, people. They now power over half of the new electric cars sold. So in 2023, it was half as many as the share is now. So they're actually powering a lot of cars.
Yeah.
And it prevents maybe some really long-range cars, but I think the LFP batteries have improved. And they're kind of interesting because they work a little better in cold weather, and they can sit around at 100%. It doesn't matter as much. You don't have to baby them as much, so it's kind of cool. But the longer range cars tend to be a normal lithium, not a normal lithium, but not the lithium iron phosphate, just the more standard chemistries. Waymo, as I said earlier in the introduction, is using DoorDash, the gig worker delivery service. Waymo's an electric, it's a spinoff of Google that has robo-taxis, cars that drive themselves. They're set up in about 6 cities. They're going to get to about 12 plus London, England pretty soon this year. And these are cars that drive themselves. They got doohickeys on the outside, unlike Teslas, that help them drive around the cities, and they have paid customers. And this has been going on for some time, but they're really starting to spread now. But there's a problem because they've been using the Jaguar I-Pace, which is kind of a normal SUV. It's an electric SUV, but it's pretty much a normal SUV. So if somebody doesn't close the door all the way, they can't drive.
Yeah.
So they have to call DoorDash. This is from a user on Reddit who was a DoorDash driver, had an offer to close a door in a Waymo for $11.25. I assume he took it because that's an easy gig. No tip, though. No tip.
No.
That's for sure. And finally this week, Brian, lasers. Power beaming is an emerging technology that attempts to use laser light, microwaves, or radio waves to deliver power from one point to another to avoid recharging downtime. Washington-based Powerlight announced in December that their laser-based system successfully delivered uninterrupted power to a drone at an altitude of 5,000 feet. I think they did like 800 watts, but now it's at the kilowatt level, so over 1,000 watts. While powering drones may be an obvious use case, power beaming could one day deliver energy to remote islands. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I mean, theoretically, you've got your semi-truck driving down the road. Could you, beam a laser from a satellite onto your semi-truck and charge it while it's driving down the highway?
Maybe a drone reflects the laser. There's a drone flying over that follows your... Every semi has a drone. I don't know. We're getting to the point where some of these things aren't that weird to say out loud, but there's vehicles you can buy in China that come with their own drone. Big drones. So while powering drones may not be the obvious case, power beaming can one day deliver energy to remote islands, electric vehicles, or even from orbiting solar collectors, which some people have speculated would be a thing to do. Put solar panels in space. New Zealand-based Emrod is testing whether microwaves can be used to beam power to remote islands, and they wouldn't be affected by the weather. See, laser beams are affected by the weather. You have to have the light go through the clouds or the particles or the pollution or the wildfire smoke. That's
true. The clouds would totally interrupt your laser beam-powered semi-trailer.
But I will say this, the drone charging by laser has been proven to work. And of course, military uses right now, but sometimes, beneficial things from military, GPS we have in our cars now because of the military. Sometimes technology filters down to society, for better or worse. The current challenge is getting laser power to a moving target, not a stationary one. Right now, they're working with stationary targets. But I think that's cool that they could charge up at over 1,000 watts from a laser.
Yeah.
Of course, there are some dangers. These will, blind you if you're looking at a 1 kilowatt laser or things like that. But they are tiny. The width of these lasers are in millimeters. They're just, it's interesting. And I think we will see it in some use case applications somewhere. Maybe our skies will be lit up by lasers.
Lasers can do anything, including putting them on, the heads of sharks.
Right.
All right, that's the show for this week. You can find us on social media at Clean Energy Pod, and that Patreon is patreon.com/cleanenergypod. The email is cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. And as always, remember to hit that follow or subscribe button on your podcast app.
And we hope that everyone will join us on our Patreon page at patreon.com, whether you support us or not. We've got posts there that are public, some that are behind paywalls for people who support us. Thank you to our Patreon Clean Club executive members, Green Bastard, Brent Routley, and Tiernan. And our bonus podcast just dropped a few days ago. And what did we talk about? We talked about new data center being built near our city, whether the region can supply enough cheap electricity for power-hungry projects, Bell frustrations from the streaming subscription mess that they have, cord cutting and how people are navigating modern TV options, extreme winter weather, and cold weather survival tips, heat pump performance in deep cold. Brian has an update on his heat pump, e-bike speed rules, and safety concerns, and all kinds of other stuff, including hydrogen. That is on our bonus podcast for Clean Club members or higher. Thank you all for supporting our podcast. We'll see you again in 7 days for our 300th episode, Brian.
Yeah, see you next week for 300.